Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good evening, viewers. This is Mehdi Kazmi from New York with our Mukalma series today. Once again, it is my honor to welcome Dr. Rachana Umashankar, who is a professor of religious studies, and she has a particular interest in Sufism, particularly subcontinental Sufism. And today we are going to continue the discussion that we had last time with a little bit of a gap, for which my apologies. But we're going to continue with our discussion regarding Sufi poetry and some of the esoteric or peculiar aspects of tasawwuf, in which we notice that there is a somewhat of an irreverence or a little mischievousness in the devotion to the divine and Rachna. So, as we were discussing prior to our program, why don't you begin and let us know what your thoughts are?
Very happy to be here again after a while, as you said. The question is why do we find in Sufi writing, in Sufi poetry, a lot of provocative language, right? Language that seems to, as you say, be irreverent, that sometimes seems to go contrary to ideas of monotheism or prohibitions of idol worship or consumption of alcohol, etc. Right? Why is Sufi poetry sort of so full of imagery and language that seems to kind of be counterintuitive, if you will, or defy expectation and almost purposely provocative, right? And it is the point is that it is purposeful, that it is purposeful.
I ask: is this more apt in the subcontinental Sufi world, or is it a worldwide phenomenon?
No, again, I have to beg forgiveness. My area of expertise doesn't extend to Sufism in, say, West Africa, for example, which has its own rich Sufi tradition. So I can't speak to that. But certainly in the Indo-Persian tradition, what I'm saying applies, certainly. Before we even kind of jump into it, I could give an example of a certain kind of provocativeness, right? And I'll give you an example not from from a poem, but I'll give you an example of a story. So we can start with a story that is told by Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi in his discourses. Fihi Ma Fihi is his collected discourses. Mm-hmm. And in his discourses, Rumi tells the story of Maulana Bahauddin. And the story goes something like this, that once the Maulana Bahauddin is sitting in contemplation, and he is in the zone, right? He's in wajd, right? He is in a luminous state, and it is then time for the prayer. Right? The azan calls out, and some of his students rise to pray, and a couple of his students, since their master is in a state, is in hal, they sit to attend to him, to make sure he's okay. And these two students who are watching over their master kind of have this sort of, they have this experience that the students, the disciples who are facing the Qibla and praying, they in fact have their backs towards the Kaaba. And the Maulana, who is not facing in the designate, who is not facing the Qibla, he is in fact facing the Kaaba. right? That the students in sort of attendance are able to kind of like, they are also in a certain state of hal, and they kind of see this through their inner eye, right? That those who are, for in the obvious state are facing the Qibla, have their backs turned towards the Kaaba, whereas the Maulana who is not facing the Qibla is actually facing the Kaaba, right? So what's going on here? So Rumi tells the story, and he explains that what's happening here is that when the Prophet Muhammad designated the Kaaba as the Qibla, it is not the structure of the Kaaba that is designated as the direction of prayer. God is the direction of prayer, right? The Kaaba is merely a placeholder, right? A tangible thing, right? A solid
Something you can
thing.
visualize, yeah.
Yes, something you can visualize, a solid, stable thing that you can focus on. But that is not the Qibla, right? The true Qibla is the divine.
Right.
And if one is to truly face the Qibla, right? Then where God is, that is the Qibla, right? And so when Maulana Bahauddin is in his state of hal, right, he is in the presence of the divine in that
Right.
state. And so, in effect, he is in the Qibla, right? He is in the presence of the Qibla himself, right? Whereas those who are facing away from him, who are facing the kind of the compass point direction of the Kaaba, right? They are not facing the real Qibla in that moment, right? So the idea there is that the structure of the Kaaba should not be confused with the actual intent of what the Qibla is, right? Now, I tell this story because this is an example of a way in which, in the discourses of Rumi here, Rumi is telling a story that seems to fly in the face of appropriate Islamic ritual. Right? Appropriate Islamic ritual is to face in the direction of Kaaba when you pray.
Or convention.
Right, that is the convention. And here the Rumi is saying, no, what was observed was correct, right? That in fact, because Maulana Bahauddin was in a state of hal, that was the correct Qibla, right? And again, ostensibly, it seems that, on the surface level, the story seems to be saying that, the students, the disciples who are actually doing what they're supposed to be doing are doing the wrong thing. Whereas the Maulana who is flouting convention, not even sitting for namaz, right, is in the correct, facing the correct direction, is the Qibla, right? And so a story like this is told, right? Stories like this are told as a reminder that the surface level and literal aspects of the world, right, are not to be seen as the end point.
Right.
And let me explain what I mean by that further, right? That the tangible world, the world that we see around us, right, even the words on the page, for example, right, are only a starting point, only a gateway towards something that is vaster and bigger and deeper in meaning. And so it is a reminder for the Sufi practitioner to not stop at the surface, but to delve deeper, to dive deeper beyond the surface. Right? Now, to explain that further, I could bring up the three-tiered concepts of Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, as explained by the Prophet Muhammad. Right? So some of our viewers may be familiar with this. It's a very famous hadith, and the basically the angel Gabriel quizzes the Prophet Muhammad about the fundamental principles of this religion, of this way of life, and the Prophet says that well, the first level, right, the first principle is Islam, right, which of course means submission. And the definition of Islam that is given is the submission to God as shown through the performance of the five pillars, right? The Shahada, Salah, Saum, Zakah, Hajj. Right? And so that is just the surface level, right? That is the initial stage. A deeper level of engagement with the divine, right, is Iman, which is faith or belief. And that's defined as faith in in God, in the prophets, in the sacred texts, in the cosmology of the Abrahamic traditions. So that's the next level, the deeper level of engagement, which is Iman. But then that isn't even the last level, right? Further than that, you have Ihsan, which is translated as spiritual virtue, spiritual excellence. And the Prophet Muhammad defines Ihsan in a very interesting way. Okay? He defines Ihsan as praying as though you see God, though you don't see God, right? But knowing that He sees you. Right? So praying as though you see God face to face, although you don't see Him, you know that He sees you. Right? And I guess a summation of that idea is praying as though you know as a truth that you are in the presence of the divine. Right? To know that you are in the presence of the divine. That is ihsan, is to feel the imminent presence of God. Right? So those are the three tiers, right? Islam, Iman, Ihsan. And in Sufism, there is a great deal of emphasis is in not considering Islam, right, the rituals, as just boxes you have to check, right? That you perform the rituals because they need to be performed, right? That's okay at a beginner's level. Right? But the idea is that these practices, these ritual practices, right, that constitute Islam, the level of Islam, they are meant to be keys that open the door to Iman. Right? That through the practice of those rituals, you deepen your faith. Right? That your Iman grows. And then Iman and Ihsan, Iman and Islam then become keys that open the next door, which is the door to Ihsan, or feeling the presence of God. Right? And so a lot of the provocative language used in Sufi writing is meant to shake the listener or the reader from their position of being stuck at the level of Islam, right? By challenging the kind of this, by being irreverent towards these sacrosanct ritual practices, right? By being irreverent towards notions of what is haram, right? Notions of what is permitted or not permitted, by being irreverent to these Islam level aspects of the religion, the Sufi writers are attempting to get the listener and the reader to think beyond these rituals and these practices as an end in and of themselves. Right? That if you are doing these things only to check a box, then there's not much of a point to it. Right? And so in tripping you up right, in making you think about some of these things in an irreverent way. It's getting you to see past these rituals as sacred for the sake of being sacred, right? And to start thinking about, oh, what is the intent behind these rituals, right? What door, doors do they open?
So what is the purpose of the deeds that you are committing?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So the story about the Qibla there, right? At a surface level, right, someone who is not of the Sufi tradition might read it and say, "Ye kya hai?" What is this? It is a flouting of, the Prophet Muhammad has declared that the Qibla is in the direction of the Kaaba. This is a clear violation of that principle. How dare you, presume that you can change the Qibla? How dare you presume that you decide where the Qibla is? That's not the point of the story, right? The point of the story is to get the reader, or in this case, the listener, since they're discourses, Rumi is talking to his students, right? To get the listeners to stop and say, hey, why am I doing this? Right? What is the point of this thing that I'm doing? To get the practitioner out of a rut, to get the practitioner out of the groove that becomes just habit, right? Where you're on autopilot and you're just doing it for the sake of doing it. The provocativeness trips you up, right? So you stop being in autopilot and you start thinking about the intent behind what you're doing, and hopefully that opens that door, right, to Iman, and then hopefully again Iman also, right? The idea is that, okay, faith in these things is important, but it's not belief for the sake of belief, right? It's not just belief because you have been told you have to believe this, right? But that deepening of faith, hopefully, is a key that opens the door to feeling the presence of the divine, right? That
Bring
all of
towards
these
the
things are
Asana
stepping
state where
stones.
you're face to face. Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
that these are all stepping stones, that they're not meant to be seen as the end points, but as milestones on a journey towards the divine. Right? That is the core idea is that kind of tripping up, right? To get you out of the rut, to get you out of autopilot, right? That is the one of the main kind of ideas behind it, the use of provocative language. I mean, I can give other examples from poetry if you'd like, but if you have any other sort of another follow-up question, happy to.
So we see this more in poetry, and we um, has it been incorporated into rituals, or at times to me it seems that this is just this is reserved for the khawas. This is not for the awam.
Ah,
Uh,
not at all. Not at all.
yeah.
Not at all. Because, I mean, qawwali is a prime example of this,
Mhm.
right? If you listen to a qawwali, any qawwal of any standing will be able to not only sing your Amir Khusro qawwalis, but will be able to weave in through the Amir Khusro qawwalis the poetry of Mira,
Mhm.
right? So what is going on? Like you sit again, in a mehfil sama, you're listening to qawwali, it starts with the call, right? You have songs like Allahu, right? But then interspersed, you have poetry written by a Hindu woman for a Hindu polytheistic deity,
Mhm.
woven into Sufi Islamic
Right.
sacred song, right? And again, at the surface level, that's extremely provocative, right? You're bringing in the language of worship. You're bringing in the poetry of worship from not just another religion, but from a polytheistic
Right.
religion that
Right.
in which images of Mira are all about her sitting in front of an idol,
Right.
right? An idol worshipping woman, worshipping a polytheistic deity, right? Her poetry is woven into the poetry of Sufi Islam, right? What could be more provocative than that, right? And the point there is, again, it's not about the surface level, right? It's about the intent behind the words. And for generations and generations, the qawwals have recognized that the kind of love infused devotion that Mira is expressing is an echo of, right, is completely mirrored by the kind of love infused devotion you find in Sufi Islamic poetry, right?
So
So,
first comes to
you,
mind, if I may,
yeah,
दिल में हक जलवा नुमा था मुझे मालूम न था ऐब तो तुम में खुदा था मुझे मालूम न था.
right. And Jigar Muradabadi's line, right? देख कर जलवाए हक बुत को किया है सजदा सिमत भूला हूं मगर किबला फरामोश नहीं. Right? Again, same idea, right? That it's not about stopping at the surface, right? But uncovering that layer of meaning below the surface. And if the layer of meaning offered is an complete, selfless, passionate love for God, then what difference does it make if it's Mira singing to Krishna or if it is, a Muslim singing to a formless God, right? What is the difference at that deeper level, right? There are differences. Obviously, there's a difference at the surface level, right? At the level of practice of Islam. But the level of Iman and Ihsan, the sentiment is the same, right? And that is the provocativeness is meant to get you past those humps, past those barriers, right? Past those grooves that you kind of get used to. And you mentioned, Buddh, right? Like replete. The Sufi repertoire is replete with references to idols. And in fact, one of the words for beloved that is very commonly used for God is sanam or sanam in Persian. And sanam literally means idol.
Right.
That's literally what the word means, right? So an idol worship, a term from idol worship has been co-opted to refer to refer to the divine in a religion that prohibits idol worship, right? It and the only reason for it, right, is to provoke the listener, right, out of a stupor perhaps. Yeah.
It is
And
the
so
same
these
direction.
are, as you say, these are awami cheese. This is not, not something exclusive, for the, the most learned. But the
Or
idea that these,
practitioners.
that these are accessible to anyone who has the heart for it or has the spirit for it. Yeah.
As my Murshid says, ये शराब तो वही है, बोतल अलग अलग है.
There we go. That is really like all of those
That's
references
another
to
metaphor of, when something intoxicating.
intoxicating.
But
Yes.
it is, that love for the divine is the metaphor used is intoxication, which signifies the closeness.
Yes, yeah. Rumi famously refers to divine love as the meye birangi, the colorless wine, right? Absolutely. So references to idols, references to intoxication, references to
Health,
polytheistic. Those
they
are, yes.
hell, and
Absolutely. And speaking of those, right, that it gives me another example comes to mind, which is the way in which the story of Iblis or Satan is very interestingly transmuted in Sufi interpretation, right? Where the story in the Islamic tradition, the story is that God creates Adam and asks all the angels to bow down before what he thinks is his most supreme creation, and all the angels bow down uh, to Adam, but Iblis or Satan refuses to do so, and for his disobedience, he is cast away. Right, and the Sufi interpretation of that is to, in some ways, empathize with Iblis. That so great was his love for God, so great was his submission to God that he could not bring himself to bow before a creation of God.
Right.
Right? That he, given that he chose disobedience over dishonoring the supreme being. Right? So that is, again, what a provocation that is, right? To cast Iblis as a sympathetic figure. Similarly, the story of Zulekha and Yusuf, right? Usually Yusuf is the hero and Zulekha is this sort of villainous character in that story. But in some Sufi readings, Zulekha is sympathized with as the epitome of someone, of the lover who must have what she must have, right? And throws social convention to the wind, right? And says, no, this is my love. This is my desire. I will have what I will have, right? And that becomes, in some ways, Zulekha becomes an ideal of that desire. Such an intense desire for the divine that one completely disregards the conventions of society, whatever the consequences may be. Right. So again, you have a subversion of interpretation there.
Yeah, no, that's yeah, and the conventions of akhirat too. So this verse, the first misra, Ahmad Bahishto Dozakh Bar Ashika Haramas, right? So
Mm.
beyond in your ishq and in your love and your devotion, you look beyond the heaven and hell and
Yeah.
Dozakh and Bahisht.
Yeah.
And then the second verse goes Hardam Razai Jana. I forget the last two or three words. So what's necessary is what needed is what you're working towards or what you're getting towards is the Razai Jana, the Khushnudi of God. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is similar to Rabia al-Basri, the story about Rabia al-Basri with the, she's carrying coals, in one bucket and cool water in another bucket, and people ask her, what you're doing, and she's like, the coals are a reminder that I shouldn't worship God, for fear of hell, and the cool water is a reminder that I shouldn't worship God for, because I desire heaven, right? But rather that I worship God for the love of God, right? So again, it's like, heaven, hell, who cares, right? God is the focus in that sense. Yeah, absolutely. There was something else I wanted to bring up. Yes, you use the word metaphor, right? That all of these, the provocative language of idol worship, of hell fire, and of intoxication. That these metaphors are just replete in Sufi poetry. And there's a really beautiful line in Arabic, and I'm forgetting some of the words in that line, but it translates to the metaphor is a bridge to reality. Right? So the line is the metaphor is the bridge to reality. And the idea there is that our human language is limited. Our human language is finite. So at a literal level, it is impossible to fully describe the unseen, the infinite, using the finite, tangible language of human
right.
beings. Right? if we're operating on a purely literal level, right, then we have a limited number of words, we have a limited number of pages, we have,
Right.
how can you describe the infinite, a vast divine using sort of the limited and finite aspects of language? And so the metaphor then, in presenting something that is seemingly false, gives us access to something that is deeply true.
Right.
Right? That when you say, for example, um, you are my sunshine, right? When you say that, um, you're saying something that is patently false. It is incorrect,
Right.
right?
But it
And
conveys the intensity of the.
exactly, there is a truth that it accesses
Right.
that literal language is incapable of presenting. Right?
Right.
So the metaphor in breaking, right? The metaphor forces us to break past the associations that we have between things and words.
Right.
Right? The name of the thing is not the thing, right? The name of the thing is an arbitrary set of sounds that human beings have put together to designate what an object is. It is not the thing.
Right.
And we're so wedded to words, we're so wedded to our sort of conception of certain things. And so the metaphor in presenting a falsity forces us to break past our attachment to words and access a truth beyond literal language, right? and
Very.
and
Yeah.
and so the all of these irreverent and provocative, in some ways the Sufis are dialing that up.
Right.
It's not just a literary convention to titillate the reader, right? But it is something that it's a mechanism to get the reader and the listener to think about a truth, like not a truth, but the truth, right? Capital T truth,
Right.
or how, right? God as an ultimate reality, right? So, and the metaphor offers the human psyche, right, an opportunity to unshackle itself
Right.
from surface level meaning, and kind of fly into something truer, perhaps, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was just thinking about it the other day. We Sufis refer to the internal struggles. Yeah. When you're in a state of, struggle towards the divine, when things are not as clear. So it is termed mujahida, as in
Mhm.
jihad.
As in
Now,
jihad,
jihad
yes.
is not just a fight. Jihad is a fight with a sole purpose of attaining closeness, to God, and that intense struggle that one goes through to clear the veils, and lift the veils and tear them apart. It's more than just a fight. But the word jihad conveys that deeper and very intense struggle. So.
Yeah, yeah. There's a famous hadith of the Prophet Muhammad where, after a battle has concluded, he says, we have now finished. We are returning from the lesser jihad, and we have to now attend to the greater jihad. And the greater jihad is, of course, that internal striving.
Right.
But as you say, these metaphors, these provocations are meant to help you do that. Right?
Right.
They're meant to help. It's meant to ease the path towards feeling the presence of the divine. Right?
Right.
By getting you um, uh, to getting you to unshackle yourself from those surface level aspects of everything, right? Whether it's language, whether it's a ritual, whether it's social convention, whatever it may be, right? That those are all the kind of the human made world in which we operate.
These are the
Right?
veils that come between you and this is our cognitive veils that we put there.
Yes, yeah. And another, of course, with that the hierarchy, the three tier, Islam, Iman, Ihsan, formation there. Um, Another very interesting thing is that Islam is the only one that is purely observable.
Mhm.
Right? It is external, it is outward facing. These are things you do,
Mhm.
others can see you do it.
Right.
Iman, it is invisible. Your
Right.
faith is between you and what you believe in.
Right.
Right? Similarly, ihsan, no one can see you feel the presence of the divine. Right? So these deeper aspects of of religious practice and state of being, they're states of being. Right?
Right.
They cannot be policed, they cannot be enforced, they cannot be observed, they cannot be proved or disproved.
Right.
It
That's where the universal aspect of cross religious and cross cultural aspect of Sufism comes in, right? That it is not just the outward journey, but the inner journey that every single human being can embark upon without the shackles of religious structures. And that is why I think, Sufism is found by most people across cultures and religions to be something that they can share with others because you're in the same journey, everybody's on the same journey. So
right.
I think that's a
Everybody
very
is on the
attractive
same
aspect of.
journey. Yeah, the idea that everybody is on the same journey. But again, looping back to the idea of the provocativeness,
All right.
right? The provocativeness is very specifically aimed towards um, the fellow practitioners within the Islamic tradition.
Right.
Right? That the provocativeness is not the provocativeness in the poetry, in the writing, is not aimed towards people in other religious traditions. It's aimed very much towards those within the Islamic tradition as a shaking a person out of that stupor, right? To not stop at the surface level,
Right.
right? Which is what gets so emphasized in most institutional forms of any religion, is the observable ritual aspects of the religion, things that you can check off, right?
Right.
As things you're doing or not doing, right? And so it is very much a wake up, meant to be a wake up call to get the person who is stuck at the level of being a Muslim, right, to delve deeper and become a mu'min, and then to delve deeper and become a muhsin,
Right.
right? That is the purpose of these provocations, is to is again
Take
to kind of reorient the focus.
Right.
Yes, to sort of to shift the focus from the surface to something deeper. Yeah.
Very good. Very interesting. I think you clarified a lot of uh, issues and interesting aspects of tasawwuf, which which serve to inspire people more towards this. Thank you so much, Rachna.
May I add one thing? May I add one last thing?
Please.
Um, one accusation that is often flung at folks who are Sufi, along the Sufi journey, is that this flouting of convention, this disregard, this irreverence for the ritual aspects of the religion, for the Islam level, right? That it is un-Islamic. right? That that the um, that
That by
because
breaking the conventions, you're veering away from the faith.
exactly, right, or that the Sufism is dismissing ritual practice entirely, right? Or that Sufi practitioners don't care about Islamic practice. Right? That is, you hear that accusation quite
Oh,
often.
yes. Very
And
much.
what I'm sorry,
Very much. Yeah,
very
you
much so.
do.
Yes, yeah. So the a lot of these, one thing I want to add is that in that the notion that Islam is not an end in itself, but is a key towards Iman, and and then is again Iman is a ramp, that leads you to Ihsan. That in moving from one to the next, the traveler on the journey doesn't leave the thing behind,
Right.
right? That Islam is meant to lead you to Iman, and your Islam then needs to be infused with Iman.
Right.
Right? That is, uh, you don't stop praying, but now you pray with a deepened faith,
Right. More
right? And
meaning,
then,
more
yeah,
deeper faith.
and similarly, when Iman opens the door to Ihsan, you don't forget about Islam and Iman, but rather you are now at the level of Ihsan, and Ihsan infuses your Iman, right, and infuses your Islam, right? So if you think about the starting point there, Islam, right, one of the five pillars of Islam is prayer 5 times a day. If you're operating at the level of Islam, right, that surface level, I'm pronouncing it sort of the Arabic way to distinguish it from like the name for the religion. So if you're operating at the level of Islam, then you're praying because it is a requirement,
Right.
right? You're praying because it's something you're obligated to do as a Muslim, right? But when you get to Ihsan, as it is described by the Prophet Muhammad, it is praying as though you realize fully that you are in the presence of God,
Right.
right? So it is not an abandonment of prayer, but rather prayer that is now infused with something deeper,
Right.
right? So that is kind of an important thing to keep in mind, that these provocations are not aimed at getting the practitioner to abandon their ritual practices and their
Of
faith,
course.
but
They're
rather to
replacing,
get them to,
but they are definitely workable towards a deeper meaning and a closeness to the divine, which is
yes,
missed in only the ritual aspect.
right, or that sort of deepening relationship to the divine is then it's like a feedback loop, right? That
Right.
the deepening relationship with the divine is will then infuse your prayer, right? That your prayer will now mean something different than it did before you started that journey, right? So
Right.
that is just something I wanted to clarify, that these are not just things that you leave behind as you move along the journey, but things that are feedback loop, that where everything infuses everything else.
Right.
I
So,
just wanted
that reminds
to.
me of a story. There was a very great peer with a lot of jalal, uh, 20th century, uh, what is now Pakistan. And he was leading the prayers at Baba Farid's shrine. And he wanted everybody to pray in a jamaat. And he was very strict and rigid about it. And so Fazaldeen Saab, who was another, his shrine is in near Rawalpindi, he wasn't there. And this peer, he got very angry and he said, where is Fazaldeen? And people said, it's not around, and he said, this is absolutely unacceptable. And next time I see him, I'm going to really give him a good thrashing. So, they pray, and then the time for the next prayer comes, and Fazaldeen is still not there. And he really got very upset. And he says, that's it, I'm going to condemn him to hell. He doesn't pray in the Jamaat. And the third time the prayer comes and he's praying and he's leading the prayers, and he suddenly gets very upset during the prayers and he breaks his niyat and he says, God forgive me, God forgive me. So people said, what happened? And he says, I want God's forgiveness because I was getting very angry at Fazaldeen. And when I say my salam jab phir raha hu, so I look to the right and I see Fazaldeen praying, and I look to the left and I see Fazaldeen praying, and I look in front and Fazaldeen is praying there. So, it wasn't just his presence, Hazrat Fazaldeen's presence in the prayer, but he's actually there and he's praying in every direction, as you had said about the earlier story, So and he said, I asked God for forgiveness for my anger, because I didn't realize how devoted he is to God in prayer. And, he's gone to a much deeper level where he's praying everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. In spirit, literally.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachna. Very enriching.
Thank you.
So we'll do this again, maybe in a couple of weeks. Yeah.
कोशिश करते हैं.
जी बिल्कुल. Thank you so much, all our viewers. Hope you enjoyed this. Thank you again, Rachna. Take care.
Thank
Khuda
you.
Hafiz.
Pleasure to be here. Khuda Hafiz.